local listing, we will, where a building does merit local listing, we will look at it very, very carefully. But we must always be mindful with local listing that it needs to have a quality justification behind it. It cannot just be listed just to defend something which is a well-liked pub. It must be also something with quality architecture. So we will be proactive. We do, I think, on both sides here agree that we should defend local pubs which are important, but we should also recognise that there are pubs that the planning system shouldn't hold up being redeveloped for much needed homes in this borough. So I think I would say to Councillor King and his committee, think about this carefully. Planning is part of the answer, but it might not be the only answer to this. It's something clearly in certain areas which is of great public concern, and we as councillors should debate this tonight. But we should not knee-jerk, and we should be mindful of not creating policy which is a catch-all and potentially prevents areas of this borough from being regenerated. So that's my sort of question to Councillor King, I guess. Think about this thoroughly. Make sure that the planning reforms, if we do make any at a local level, are the right ones for the whole of the borough, but also pick up on what Councillor Johnson is saying, which I think is right. We do need to be there to protect those local pubs which are important. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, well, it's good to see what I think might be the outlines of something of a political consensus emerging here, and I really do hope that this is an issue on which the two parties can work together constructively on, even if there are some aspects on which they're genuinely held differences of opinion. As Councillor Johnson and the other speakers have already said, I think we'd all recognise what a vital contribution well-run pubs can make to the fabric of our local communities. We know that loneliness and isolation are two of the biggest challenges that we face in modern-day society. And actually, I believe that pubs can make a huge contribution in helping to combat these, providing a shared space where people from all walks of life can exchange views over a pint and engage in shared activities. And indeed, I think actually, surely we find as a council, as 60 councillors, it's often the pub that gives us the opportunity to build bridges after the, over the political divide, after a hard night's council debate, and of course for you lot to privately admit that we'd got it right and in fact you'd got it wrong. Of course.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas.
I wonder how many of the colleagues around both sides are sitting wondering whether this debate would have been heard in such silence and reverence if former Councillor Pritchard was still in the chamber.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Thomas.
I personally have no idea whatsoever. However, I think hopefully we can agree about the overall direction of travel. And I do welcome the governing party's willingness to follow the lead on this occasion by Councillor Johnson and Labour in this motion. There are, however, a few points I wish to explore about how we get to where we want to be. The first point is that we need to be careful that the protection and promotion of pubs is not just about the town centre areas. I think it's important for us all to recognise that they can also be vital to the life of the more residential areas of the borough as well. I note that the amendment under Part A inserts the word some, and I think Councillor Cuff has set out quite a convincing case that there is in fact a need to recognise that pubs differ, that some are much more valued than others, but I do hope that this amendment won't be applied in a crude way in which some geographical areas and the cause of keeping our pubs alive in them is given higher priority than in others. I'm sure that wasn't the intention, but I would like us to recognise the importance of pubs throughout the borough. Second.
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Thomas, would you let your...
I hope you don't mind me asking, Councillor Thomas. My concern about what Councillor Cuff was saying was it seemed to move towards a kind of middle-class homogeneity amongst pubs. You've got to be a gastro pub, and you've got to be able to pay £3.50 for a beer. And after all, all the pubs he mentioned as being worthy of closing were not exactly at the high end of the market. And I take it that he would agree with me that we need pubs that cater for all pockets and tastes and not just the one kind of grouping.
I think Councillor Belton makes an excellent point, and of course I was referring before to the role of pubs in actually sustaining the social cohesion of our borough. It's not for me to say what Councillor Cuff was driving at there, but I hope that he would recognise the importance of the principle that you were outlining there. My second point is that we need to ensure that we don't just make it harder for pubs to close, but that we help make and keep them viable by attracting more pedestrians and shoppers to our local high streets in which they're often situated. There's only one pub in my ward. It's the Fursdown, and it's working to find ways of increasing the number of people coming through its doors and engaging with the members of the local community to do so. But there is also a need for the council to do its bit, to do more to make our high streets attractive to shoppers and to provide support for small local businesses to survive and thrive. And of course, our pubs are included within that. Too many of our local shopping parades look neglected and run down, with little sign of interest from the council. Where this is the case, it's hardly a surprise if pubs in these places actually find it a struggle to turn a profit. Finally, we do need to get a move on with this. Councillor King was talking before about the need to take a very measured approach to the formulation of council policy. Frankly, I wish that we'd seen that on some of the issues we've recently debated, such as the changes to the housing department. I think we might have been much better off if we had. And of course, we do need to go through due process. But it does concern me that there's no timescale attached to the Conservative amendment.
Think of winding up.
Thank you.
Please.
And I do hope that this is an attempt to knock the issue into the long grass. We do have a real opportunity here. Let's make sure that we seize it with both hands.
Thank you. It would be a brave politician that came between a constituent and his local, and I don't think we'll be doing that tonight. I can sense that from both sides. Obviously, this opposition motion stems from the Strategic Planning Committee about 2 weeks ago on the wheat sheaf, when residents and the ward councillors and a certain local MP stood up for their pub. And there's not much to argue, actually, really, regarding this particular motion. I'm sure there's no dissent in supporting historical buildings that are popular pubs at the heart of our local communities. But there's no mention in this motion of the crux of the committee's debate, which was about the change of planning policy to prevent demolition or change of use of the wheat sheaf. Should it be immediate, or should it be delayed for full consultation? Obviously, such a policy change shouldn't be taken lightly, and the needs of all the stakeholders, not just the people who drink in the pub, but the people who own the pub, the other stakeholders involved, should be fully, all those stakeholders should be involved. So I'm glad to report on the night that Councillors Belton and Carpenter supported the majority view. Obviously, slapping an immediate Article 4 direction on the wheat sheaf wouldn't be in the best of interests of anybody. And actually, I don't think the Tooting MP was best pleased with that, but that was the decision taken that night. But anyway, the motion tonight actually neatly sidesteps that particular Labour disagreement and goes for the big push to save all Wandsworth pubs. It's certainly a good idea to do all we can to keep popular pubs on the road and suggest other community uses. And I do like your suggestion that there could be other community uses such as a school or a nursery, health clinic, art gallery. There's a wonderful range of activities that go on in an old pub, cinema, a dance hall. But as some of you have noticed, and the eagle-eyed among you have noticed, there's one little difference. It's that one word, some, which I think is very important in the first word of the motion and in the one we've suggested from our side. I believe we should take a pub-by-pub approach to preservation, not just lump all pubs together. I'm sure we can all think of former public houses, and Councillor Cuff had a very lively example that we just wouldn't ever shed a tear over losing. They've quickly perhaps been turned into productive small business use or into much-needed homes, which a lot of us have been speaking about tonight. The ones we really want to save are the real gems. They're the ones that are the centres of our community. And in Nightingale Ward, unlike Fursdown, which only has one, we have quite a lot in Nightingale, and we can, between us, we can name quite a fair few. We've got the Hope, we've got the Nightingale, the Balham Bowls Club, the Regent, and obviously, importantly, the Wheatsheaf. And they're not all gastropubs, as Councillor Belton mentioned. The Nightingale's been going on for many, many years in a very, very traditional old pub. And And Tooting Bec, though, as we're talking about the Wheatsheaf tonight, is a case in point. Tooting Bec really deserves its pub, and it's worked very hard to keep its pub. It's a thriving place, it's coming up in the world, it's a major road junction, which is always important for pubs, got an important tube station literally outside, it's got a wonderful refurbished post office just up the road with much longer opening hours, and it even has new Lebanese and Japanese restaurants, so it's a place where a pub really should be thriving. So it does deserve its own pub. We don't want a building that looks like a pub, we want a pub, and I think we're going to get that. And the Tooting Wheatsheaf supporters, ably chaired by Dan Watkins, has been very instrumental in preserving the Wheatsheaf, not just as that building, but as a community pub. So there's little point in saving the building for it to be turned into a Tesco or a Quick Fit.
Councillor MacDermott, would you go to
Thank you. I just wonder, over this issue of the word some, the Wheatsheaf changed hands, what was it, a year or so ago. I wonder how passionate we would be feeling if it was still the old-style Wheatsheaf, which was a rather less, I mean, it wasn't a bad, awful pub like maybe some of the ones we were talking about on the Planning Applications Committee, but nonetheless, it wasn't such an attractive pub as it is now. And that is one reason why we might want to temper this word. We might want to leave out the word some, as circumstances change, ownerships of pubs changes, and then the whole culture of that pub may change. I mean, in Tooting and Graveney Ward, we've had the Long Room, which was the Mitre. It's now a very acceptable place to go to. So things do change, and therefore some might mean we've got a predetermined attitude towards some of pubs, whereas they could in fact be changed for the better.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Well, actually, I think that really just enforces the point that we should be done on a pub-by-pub basis, and we can take that into account. Just to finish off, I do know a thing or two about pubs. I have two brothers who actually bought a pub just recently. They bought it to keep that pub alive in the village. They may well have bought it also to guarantee their beer drinking for a few more years. But it is a tough life. It's a real tough life being a publican. Long hours and reams of red tape. And some publicans just have had enough and want to get out. But of course, give popular pubs a chance to keep going, and perhaps they can be taken on a community resource. But as Councillor Cuff says, is it right to treat all pubs the same? We could create possible blight and delay development for 12 months. Sometimes due to demographic and economic changes, some pubs have ended up in the wrong places, and they're shadows of their former selves. Why not allow quick redevelopment? After all, not all businesses are immoral, and we do desperately need new homes. But anyway, generally, I think the motion is on the right track, but I think we prefer our own, and we definitely need to put that word some in. Thank you.
1993, that was the first time that, September 1993, was the first time that I went into the Wheatsheaf pub. It was also the first time that I came to live in Wandsworth. As a student... I think there is a backhanded compliment saying that I look younger than my actual years there, so thank you very much, Councillor Belton. I'm on red light already. Anyway, I think it's fair to say that in 1993, the Wheatsheaf pub was not as a desirable place to be as it is today. And I certainly think that if people had been proposing that the Wheatsheaf might close in 1993, I don't think there would have been the same sort of local support for the venue. Having said that, I think Councillor Belton was being unfair on Councillor Cuff. I've been in lots of gastropubs that are very friendly and very successful, and I've been in gastropubs that are less than friendly, and I don't tend to go back. Similarly, I've been in fantastic working class pubs. My favourite is probably the Labour Working Man's Club in Trimdon Colliery in Sedgefield, which is where Tony Blair was selected as an MP. I'm fortunate enough to have a very good friend of mine. His father used to live in the colliery and was a coal miner, and I was fortunate enough to go in there. Extremely friendly people, extremely friendly atmosphere, but I've also been into working class pubs where that would not necessarily be the case, and I don't think that the local community would be upset about them closing. We talked about consensus. I think there is very much a consensus on both sides here about the desirability of keeping pubs that are community hubs and are genuinely popular. But as has been highlighted, it's important to distinguish between genuinely popular and community hubs and other pubs that are perhaps less desirable and actually could often cause blight into an area. I think I was, because both parties supported the motions at the Planning and Transportation Committee, I was surprised that this was the debate brought forward by the Labour Party. I also thought, because I was surprised because I thought there was some division within the Labour Party on whether or not to support the motions or not. It seems that quite rightly, Councillor Johnson talked about the Save the Wheatsheaf campaign, which is supported by all both major parties, and has representatives from both major parties on it. What I was surprised about was that at the committee, Sadiq Khan wouldn't support that group, which I thought was which was very disappointing, because I think one of the things that the Wheatsheaf campaign has shown is that if people work together, then it's possible to build up a community spirit and put party politics behind us in order to support a significant community hub. When it comes to setting pub policy, though, we mustn't set pub policy by one pub. We must set pub policy based on the needs of the entire borough. Now, there is a lot of changes that have taken place in this area over the last few years. Nationally, there certainly has been a significant reduction in pubs. However, there's no suggestion that that is the case in Wandsworth overall. We have recently had examples, as Councillor Cuff was talking about, of the Castle pub, which seemed to be under threat, but actually the Castle pub will now be rebuilt thanks to the efforts of this council. And generally in most of our town centres and even in our secondary parades as well, pubs seem to be doing very well. But, sure, I like to.
Thank you, Councillor King. Very briefly, then, clearly you're close to the end of your speech. But look, I mean, we've talked a lot about consensus, and you know, I was interested in Councillor Cuff's words before. I'd actually like to ask you a question that you might deal with in the closure of your remarks. This side of the chamber, we're calling for, and we believe in, a borough-wide protection policy for pubs codified in council policy. Do you?
And there is where we differ, in the sense that you are willing to rush into making a claim about something, about whether it works. It's the same on energy prices, which Councillor Grimston responded to earlier. Oh, just make sure lower price, we'll just ask for lower prices and that will be okay. What we do is look at what works and what powers we have. Because it's been claimed, for example, tonight that an Article 4 would save the Wheatsheaf. Actually, there's a lot of doubts about whether that is true. Because putting an Article 4 on, potentially the applicant would go to appeal if it was turned down at the planning committee. And then it would be still knocked down. So but with potentially cost implications for the council. So actually, the way that this council has been run for over 30 years, and extremely successfully, as seen by the residents' survey, is that we think very carefully about our policies to make sure we get them right. And if you look at our town centres, the reason they are so successful is because we have got the policies right. And it is important that we don't rush into knee-jerk reactions based on one pub, but actually think very carefully and look carefully at what the evidence is saying and make sure that we protect in our important hubs and get the policy framework right. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I just finish on a point of information, just very quickly? Just very quickly, Councillor Johnson, I think you should just look at our plans. Outside our town centres, there is a planning policy that does provide, I think, the protection to a degree that you're talking about, which requires a marketing campaign. I think you should look at our planning policies in more detail, because you'll find that there is more protection than your motion suggests.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. I think one of the things about pubs and the way this campaign has developed is that it is really important part of people's identity and sense of heritage that these pubs represent. I was told by one of my English teachers at school, probably misquoting or making up a quote, that Shakespeare, the King James Bible and the pub were the three great things that Britain had given the world. I think that this idea that the pub is the centre of a hub for a community is essential in why this campaign picked up so much support. One of the things about pubs, of course, is that they are relatively classless and relatively democratic. You can go into pubs and there will be a wide range of different sorts of people in there. But there also is a need for a range of pubs. In Tooting we have the Wetherspoons, we have the Antelope, we have the SW17 cocktail bar. So we have a broad range of pubs. And in fact, I think one of the things to note about Tooting in particular is that whilst in many ways you could say that the shops and so on are gradually turning into pound shops and 99p shops and even 89p shops, how low can we go? But we are building a very successful nighttime economy based upon good pubs and entertainments of various kinds. So, for example, in pubs in Tooting, you can go to the cinema in the pub, you can see a play in the pub, you can get food. During the daytime, mothers and children can go to the pub. You can even go into a pub and you can listen to music. You might even hear me playing. You have been warned if you come in. So pubs themselves have been a very important part of the regeneration. If you were to have gone to the Antelope about 10 years ago, you would have probably been thankful to have got back to the door at all from the toilet as you went out, because it was actually not the safest place to be in. It is now a very desirable pub. And the point here is that you cannot necessarily tell what a pub is going to be like in the future from what it has been like in the past. The Gorringe, for example, now has a cinema, it has a fantastic restaurant. When I first went there, it was an interesting pub with some characters in it who could be sometimes very volatile. But for all that, I did enjoy it, and I've stuck with that pub through thick and thin over the years. One of the things, though, that we need to note, and this is why the pubs need protection, is that there is no pub in Wandsworth at all which would not be more valuable as a piece of development site for housing than as a pub. That is the sad truth. If we simply let the market reign, we wouldn't have a single pub left in Wandsworth. We'd have lots and lots and lots of quite expensive houses, but we would have no pubs for anyone to drink in. They would have to go to the supermarket and sit in front of the TV, drinking their cans of whatever they have bought or their bottles of wine. And sad is the man who drinks alone, I'm afraid to say. So the important thing is that we need some protection for the pubs in this area. They're essentially part of our identity, essentially part of our economy, and in fact they can lead regeneration rather than, as Councillor Cuff suggests, be a brake on regeneration. And that's why I think it's very important to have a policy which stretches across the whole borough. You do not know what a pub this year will be like next year with a new landlord. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbons. Right, we have the amendment. I feel there's no agreement on either side, but for the amendment, for those who are in favour of the amendment, please show their hands. Amendment. This is the amendment, okay? 36. Those against the amendment? The amendment is carried then. The amendment is carried. It's carried, the amendment is carried 37-13. Is that agreed? Yes. No, the amendment is carried.
Yes, and the substantive motion can have the same numbers.
Are you happy with the substantive motion? The same numbers? So in other words, you want to vote for your motion?
No, the motion as amended.
Okay, thank you. Housing ask. I'd like Councillor Ellis to move the paragraph 18.
Madam Mayor, paragraph 18 is for information and there are speakers.
Thank you. And this is for information. As you say, there are two speakers, Councillor Martin Johnson and Councillor Hogg. So Councillor Martin Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The design of the estates we're discussing now are ones that none of us would have countenanced if we were around at the time. And I think it's true that nobody in this chamber is guilty of in choosing the design of these estates. So I'm pretty sure that everybody here tonight will be supporting this item, in principle, if not in every detail. But we are in the early stages of a very long process which started in March 2012. All that time's gone by very quickly, and it may seem that we haven't got very far. But the tens of millions of pounds earmarked for the project hopefully sends a signal that we mean business. This is long-awaited expenditure that responds to the initial consultation with local residents about the future of their estates. That unsurprisingly identified that they give a very low satisfaction rate for the environment on their estates. So we've got to do something. But that's not to suggest that the housing department weren't anything but first class in their management of the estate. They did the best they could. Though it has to be said that quality management did suffer during the period of outsourcing of management a few years ago, but fortunately that was brought back in-house and things were on a more productive course. It's now about time that Winstanley and York Road residents shared in the upgrade that's taken place in most of Wandsworth in recent years, because there's a complete range of tenures here: council tenants, private tenants, leaseholders, and even some freeholders. That all makes the process a lot more complex. Each of those groups will have differing aspirations. Now, of the four options currently being consulted on with residents, it already seems that it is the more comprehensive options that are finding favour, which demonstrates again that we're right to be on this course. But the future choices belongs to residents, and it's good to see the commitment in this report to thoroughly robust and meaningful consultation. It's also good to see in the report that funding is to be made available to resident leaseholder groups to enable them to get independent legal advice. And it's also good to see that the council has committed to re-providing existing social rent housing as a minimum, because we do have to keep faith with tenants. We need their support during this process. This is a very complex programme, and there are many hurdles to overcome, not least of which is the development of a package that would offer opportunities to existing property owners who would be affected by any redevelopment, to purchase affordable properties in whatever development takes place in or around this estate. There's still a way to go on that, but I'm sure we'll get there. And in responding to the current levels of concern about this aspect, the council does need to put its skates on, to ensure trust is not lost. The length of time it will all take does worry me a bit, and I hope that we can move it along as fast as possible. Now, although it was very small by comparison with the Winstanley, it's worth recalling the outstanding regeneration of the nearby St James's Grove estate a few years ago. When that was originally suggested, residents were cynical in the extreme. They didn't believe what we were going to do. They thought we were just going to pull the rug out from under them. Two things made them change their minds. Firstly, the support from members opposite, led by Councillor Belton. Secondly, the council was able to demonstrate commitment by demolishing some of the dreadful walkways and some of the dodgy, crime-ridden car parking areas that existed as soon as humanly possible. I do hope that the Cabinet Member for Housing will give some thought to what could be done here to similarly demonstrate that he really does mean business.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This crucial project has begun well, thanks to hard work by staff and consultants, cooperation between the political parties, and crucially engagement from local people, who so far have backed the very most bold option put in front of them. And it will be a mighty challenge now for us to sell the benefits of potentially demolishing 700 homes and replacing them with around 2,000 new homes on that estate. I would say the way you convince them of that is to ensure that they feel they have a chance to rent and buy those new properties, and also, as outlined earlier by the leader in Nine Elms, the chance to participate in building the new estate, which will then have more businesses and jobs which aren't there at the present that they can also participate in. I'm very excited by the plans, which will preserve but completely change the green open space, more shops, a new leisure centre. I don't know if you've seen it, it's all online, and there's an exhibition in York Gardens Library, a sort of new pathway from the flats by the Thames through to Clapham Junction Station, which will hopefully have a new sort of front entrance at the Grant Road side with shops and rented housing there. However, it's not really what we think at this stage, which is the main interest. It's for us to reach out and listen to local people. And Councillor Belton, Councillor Speck, myself, and I'm sure many other people have spoken to hundreds of residents over the past few months. Many are comfortable even with the most disruptive plans, but naturally some concerns remain. So I won't talk so much of their excitement. I'll just briefly outline some of the issues that remain to be resolved. Tenants who are more in favour of the plans than leaseholders, as they're guaranteed a new flat in the nearby area, are concerned about long build times and the fact if you're decanted to one area, some of them have Googled other regenerations and seen that residents don't always get to move back, despite the promises made to them. Leaseholders are offered, resident leaseholders, the value of their property plus 10%. I spoke to one man in his 70s with health issues who pointed out he's simply never going to get another mortgage. There are some residents in Ganley Court who are dead set against the regeneration because they perfectly rationally point out that even if you give them what their 3-bedroom house with a garden is now worth, 5 minutes from Clapham Junction Station, they'll simply not be able to buy back into the area. Although I would say the master planner's responses to those issues so far have been really encouraging and creative. Of course, some residents believe it will never happen. There is a lack of trust in the council from, the state that we've allowed the estate to fall into, and there are fears that the existing strong sense of community will be lost. However, I would emphasise these are problems we're going to tackle together. There has been extraordinary bipartisan support, and I'd agree with every word Councillor Johnson said, and I think it was a wise move to put him on the steering committee, not least, for his work on Castlemaine And last week he made the point that we should try to bring forward the benefits to residents. And I think as quickly as possible, regenerating the incredibly run-down square in front of Penethorne House, that's an early first step we can take to build trust. And I'd also argue we should capture some of the gains from what may be £1 billion worth of new housing for the community. The National Lottery has given £1 million over the next 10 years to the community as a big local fund, which has been really successful in harnessing the energies and the knowledge of local people. And I think this would be a great vehicle to put developers' contributions into in the future. Councillor Johnson mentioned March 2012, and I remember when it began. My first experience was on the day of the Southfields by-election, when Labour and Conservative councillors peeled away from campaigning to go to the Winstanley estate to talk about the big local, to think about improving the neighbourhood. Unfortunately, we couldn't meet in the library as we planned, because sadly there'd been a young man shot there that afternoon. But we absolutely got stuck in, and for me that's the spirit of this project, that we're cooperating, we're putting the residents at the heart of it, and any tragedy that happens will only redouble our determination to push this project forward. Because the prize is great. It's a template for regenerating our estates into mixed, integrated communities. We shouldn't tolerate enclaves of great deprivation
Councillor Hogg, would you
any more than
kindly wind
great
up,
wealth.
please?
I will just finish, Madam Mayor, and then we can have our mulled wine and mince pies. Where people from all walks of life can meet in the street, in the public space, and be proud that their children thrive in the same schools and playgrounds. Thank you very much.
Councillors, this is for information. Is that agreed on both sides? Great. We now continue with the Executive Report number 2, Housing OSC. Councillor Ellis. Para 1 is for information.
Paragraph 1 is for information.
This is the review of the Housing Department. Do you both support? You're against it. Right. Those.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I haven't heard
sorry.
guillotine being moved yet. So, has it? Because
I was under the impression Councillor Belton had agreed not to speak, as had Councillor Ellis, on this debate, but
I certainly agreed not to speak, but I'm certainly going to speak if the guillotine is not moved. I mean, which way do you want to put it?
In that case, Madam Mayor, understanding Rule 34, may I move the guillotine and expedite the remaining business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Paragraphs 2 and 3 are for information.
On behalf of Councillor Mrs Tracy, paragraphs 5, 6 and 7 are for information.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Paragraphs 8 to 10 are for information.
Paragraph 11 is for information. Paragraph 12 for information. Paragraph 13 for information. And paragraph 14 for information.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Paragraph 16 is for information.
Madam Mayor, paragraph 17 is for information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 13, paragraph 1 and 2 are for information.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Paragraph 1 for information. Paragraph 2 for information.
On behalf of Councillor Maxwell Scott, move reception of report number 6. Paragraph 1 is for information. Paragraph 2 is for information. Same numbers. And paragraph 3 is for information.